Hello and welcome to Shattered Lives, Reach Ireland's crime podcast. My name is Paul Healy. I'm crime correspondent with the Irish Daily Star and Irish Mirror, and I'm joined as always by Michael O'Toole, our crime and defence editor. Mick, it's long overdue. Welcome back.
I thought I'd done something wrong, Healy. I thought you were ignoring me. Well, I always do that actually, but yeah.
I try to ignore you. That's
so. You're not allowed to. So essentially, you were on holiday. And I was going to say I got the man flu, but I actually got COVID.
Yeah, it's going around. I got a touch of it myself after coming back from a week off. From 2 weeks off, 2 wonderful weeks off. It's what's great about going on a break is you come back refreshed, and we need it in this job at times.
Yeah, the thing is, we were going to do the questions and answers. We were going to do them. But I remember I sent you a voice note. I did sound like Barry White, didn't I?
You sounded even raspier, if that's even possible.
Yeah, fuck me. I thought I was toast. Anyway, it knocked me out for a week. I was just gone. So I got COVID 2 years ago, and I had a headache for a couple of days. Yeah. This one absolutely floored me. So we survived anyway.
We did, and plenty of news stories, crime stories to discuss in the interim. Some of which have been going on for weeks now, and just keep stories keep on giving. We want to first discuss the case of Gavin Plumb in the UK, a very well publicised court case now at this stage, but in particular the Irish angle to it, the shocking Irish angle to it. So obviously Gavin Plumb, as people know, has been convicted in relation to a terrifying kidnap and rape and murder plot against the well-known TV presenter Holly Willoughby, This Morning TV presenter. And we don't propose to rehearse all of the details of that court case. It's quite well known. People have probably been looking at it on the news, but in terms of the Irish angle, it did come out in the court case that Plumb was messaging an individual by the name of Mark. I think it was M-A-R-C was the way it was reported. But Mick, obviously you were covering this. It had, through a bit of digging, transpired that this individual was an Irish by the name of Mark Mulligan.
Yes. So Mr. Mulligan is well known to the Gardaí. First of all, we have to say that he hasn't been arrested or charged with any offence, either in Ireland or England yet, in relation to this plot against Miss Willoughby, which is, I think you're right, Paul, it was really terrible, troubling and worrying plot. And even just all you've got the messages, we can talk about them in a while, but just there were 3 people. There was an undercover US cop, Dave Nelson, Mark Mulligan, this man we're about to talk about, and Gavin Plumb. Gavin Plumb has been convicted. Mark Mulligan, we do know that An Garda Síochána have launched an investigation into this man. They were alerted by Interpol and Essex Police. There are lots of different police forces in England. They don't have a unitary police force. So there's the local police force, which is Essex, which was investigating this plot. Now, they were in touch with the Garda Síochána, and our sources confirmed to us, as I say, he's on the sex offenders register for life for an incident in 2014 when he was caught with what's legally known as child pornography, but we call child sex abuse material. So he's on the register for life. And we do know that the guards did visit his home. They regularly visit his home, but there's a liaison officer, but they visited at home in relation to this investigation, which they have set up. And we do know that they seized certain items, a laptop and his mobile phone. Now they're being examined at the minute. So there is an investigation, and Mr. Mulligan potentially is in serious trouble over this.
And this is highly unusual in that, I suppose, all of the allegations against Mr. Mulligan have already been aired in an open public court, okay, be it in the UK, but it is now up to Gardaí here in this jurisdiction to investigate those claims. And as you said, they've been made aware through Interpol. So that Garda investigation, we don't know how long that Garda investigation has been ongoing.
We do. We know Mr. Mulligan did have an address in Clongriffin in North Dublin when he committed his offences in 2014. He's long gone from the area. We know where he is. We're not going to say where he is, but I knocked up to the house last week, and I was speaking to someone who said that the guards visited the house about 3 months ago. Now, she said that person said that she'd been told that the investigation was finished I doubt that purely for the reason, from you and I will know this from experience, when Gardaí seize computers and phones, it's the cybercrime unit. Used to be the Garda Bureau of Fraud Investigation. Now there's the Cybercrime Bureau, who has to investigate, and whose officers have to investigate these and analyze everything's on it. That's a lengthy process. I'm not going to say it's a year, but it used to be well over a year. I think the time has come down, but it is a lengthy process by which they can examine what is on the phone and on the computer. So I don't think the investigation's finished. And the information I got from my sources was that the investigation is ongoing. Now, then that raises a couple of issues. Where did if there is an offence, and I'm not saying there is, I'm just saying there's, say if someone is charged in relation to this offence, is that person extradited, or can that person be charged here? Did the offence happen in England, or did it happen here in Ireland?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, there's a lot of tricky stuff there.
There are a couple of issues. You can be charged. I remember there's a lady called Georgina Eager in Walkinstown, maybe 20 years ago, who was murdered by an Indian national in Walkinstown. He scarpered over to England, and the English police got him, and he was arrested, charged, and put on trial in England for the offence happening in Ireland. There is I don't know if it's a treaty, but there is a convention or whatever that you can be charged in either jurisdiction. We know that people have been charged up north in relation to offences down here, and vice versa. And obviously the north is part of the UK. But that's very much down the road. But there is a Garda investigation. The Guards have this man's items. He is on the sex offenders register. He has a conviction for child sex abuse material, and also for stalking a woman who not a TV star. I have to be clear about that. An ordinary person, shall we say, and that woman subsequently moved away from there, and he got for his crimes, he got 3.5 years in prison, which is a hefty enough sentence.
Yeah, and just to explain to people, I suppose the reason why we can name Mark Mulligan is because of his conviction, and he has an MO in relation to a very, very similar offence. And I suppose that's why we can openly name him. He is a disgusting pervert who has served time in prison. He received 3 years in prison for that offence, for harassment and for the possession of the child material.
Yes, and he did effectively out himself. And I know you've got the messages there, Paul. He did out himself, because he did call himself Mark with a C, but he did send Gavin Plumb, who I think you were telling me beforehand, he's going to be sentenced on Friday, and he's looking at a hefty sentence. I'd say it'll be at least 10 years, probably more. So he did send him a story about himself, because there were stories online here, and he sent him that saying this was me. So he's banged the rights. And when we knocked to the door, that person did confirm that Mark Mulligan was in contact with Plum, that the Guard seized various items, and that he had been in these conversations. So it's a bit tricky for him.
It is, and as I said, the allegations of the messages between Mulligan and Plum came out in court, and we're going to this might be harrowing listening for some people, but just to pre-warn them, I'm going to read out some graphic messages between the two. Plum basically told Mulligan of his plot to kidnap and to attack Holly Willoughby, to rape her, and ultimately he wanted to murder her. And in the course of that, he told Mulligan that they would need to find a remote location to keep Holly Willoughby once they abducted her. And Mulligan is alleged to have said, "Definitely in the middle of nowhere, so no one can hear her scream." He said, "Celebrities think they're full of themselves. They need to be fucking put into their place." So these are the allegations against Mark Mulligan. And these interactions between Plum and Mulligan allegedly happened from right up from 2021 until June 2023, when he then is allegedly had pulled out of the plot, his role in the alleged plot to kidnap Willoughby. As we mentioned, he's a serial stalker himself, and he also had fantasies about raping TV stars and their children. As I said, he got 3 years for harassing a woman, and he threatened in messages to rape a child. Look, he has certainly a background that is alarming. And when it comes to this case, it has to be taken in that context as well. So look, he hasn't been charged with any offence. But just to read out what happened in his 2014 trial, he said that he would love to rape the 3-year-old son of a woman he knew because she pissed him off. And he allegedly said to somebody, let's snatch him, make him watch us kill his mum and dad, and then kill him. So those are the facts that came out in his particular trial. He also, people might have seen very strange photographs of Mulligan dressed in a He-Man costume. That's from a dating profile. And he, on this profile, said that he was a genuinely good person, that he's walking again, he wants to lose a few pounds. So clearly quite a deluded individual, and someone who, look, I mean, he hasn't been convicted of an offence since then, since 2014. But he's certainly a warped, disgusting human being, and he is now the subject of this new Garda investigation.
Yeah, and when I called to the house, I did speak to a woman there who did say, "Look, it was all just fantasy." Now, I was following the Plumb trial, and that I'm not talking about Mulligan, I'm talking about Plumb. That was clearly his defence, that it was all just fantasy. However, with Plumb had convictions for attempting to abduct women. So his previous actions indicated the possibility of future actions. So, but I think, whatever happens, Mr. Mulligan will say, look, it was all fantasy. But look, that's, as we say, that's way above. That's not for us to decide. There's an investigation underway. I don't think we've heard the last of it, we'll put it that way. But it'll either be good news or bad news for him, I suppose.
No, and in Plumb's case, just to mention, he had a full-on kit in which to kidnap someone. He had all of the gear, so there was plenty of evidence to suggest that he was serious about his plan. He knew the address in which he would have to go to kidnap Miss Willoughby. I mean, he had very, very serious details about her location, and so it was his defense of it being a fancy wasn't accepted by the court. Now, look, it's up to the guards to look into Mulligan's alleged role in this. That'll be a different story. But yeah.
And it's not just, it's just one other very, very quick point. Well, two, I suppose. Everybody in the area where he was living, a lot of people in the area where he was living know about his past now. And we know that there was a protest earlier this week. Now, I think Mr. Mulligan left the property, but we don't know where his whereabouts are. And secondly, this is the other thing. There were messages, but there were also voice notes. We know that Mulligan sent several voice notes to Plumb. So it's not just written down things, it's actually his voice as well. So that'll all be part of the investigation.
Well, yeah, just as you mentioned, there was a protest. We're not revealing the location at the moment where we think he is or has been. To be fair, we're not holding that back. I mean, if we did find him there and photograph him there, we would tell people. It's just, look, we're not going to. There are relatives who have little or nothing to do with this, and they get caught up in these things. So look, we know of an address, and certainly locals in this area were quick to realize when they saw the stories who he was, and there was a bit of a protest there a couple of days ago. And our understanding is that Gardaí moved people along, and that the people there were told that Mulligan wasn't present at the address at the time. Certainly we know he is connected to that address, and he may well even still be there or frequent there from time to time. So watch this space. We'll come back to you on that.
We will.
So should we talk about obviously a very interesting development in the, I suppose, unsolved gangland murder of Hamid Sanambar. I remember this just in terms of going out to the scene, a particularly harrowing, shocking murder because it happened at a wake, and that was the wake of Sean Little, also a gangland murder. Sean Little was brutally murdered in a feud that went on in the Coolock area at the time. And there was a wake outside the house, and Hamid Sanambar, who was, I suppose, a friend of Sean Little, an associate of his gang, was shot dead at the driveway of the home. But the interesting development is there has been an arrest in relation to this all the way in Spain, and you were covering this.
Yeah. So in December, so it was May 2019 when this all happened. It was a very grim week. I know you were at the Anambar scene. So a week earlier, Sean Little had been shot dead in a place called Walshestown, which is just off the M1 north of Dublin Airport. It seems he was lured to a meeting. I know he was in his car. His car was burned out and he was shot dead. I think he may have been taken out of the car and shot. And I remember being at that scene, and Hamid Sanambar turned up at that with various other people. Do you remember? Because we got photographs of him because he was quite distinctive. Didn't he have was there some sort of tattoo on his face?
A teardrop tattoo under his eye, which, you know, is often associated in Gangland as meaning you've taken a life. But also that was probably, I think, could be corrected on this, but at that point in time, definitely the only photo we had of Sanambar. Little did we know he was going to be murdered, within days.
But if you remember, I think it was the day after Sean Little was killed, one of his best friends, Jordan Davis, was murdered. He was, and a guy has just been convicted of this a while ago. He was walking with a pram, and they really went after him, and he was hunted down. And I think he knew his life was in danger. But I think it was 24 hours later. So things calmed down after those two murders, and then a week later there was the wake for Sean Little, and Hanambar turned up and he was shot dead. So there has been a Garda investigation into this. It's just over 5 years. In December 2021, there is an Irishman who was living in Spain. He's from North Dublin. Can't say who he is, but he was living in Spain. He came back and handed himself in to Gardaí. It's a Coolock investigation. I think it may have been a station in the DMR North where he was questioned. So he was what they call Section 50, which is Section 50 of the Criminal Justice Act, I think 2008, 2010. And that allows Gardaí to hold you for 7 days, and he got the full 7 days. And I remember covering it at the time. I think we broke it at the time about this fella's arrest because we sort of knew who he was, and he was in for 7 days. And I'll put it this way: I was not the only person who was expecting that man to be charged, but he was released. But a file did go to the DPP, and after he was released, he went back to Spain. So the DPP has directed. There's a European arrest warrant out for this man. Now, that's significant because under the European arrest warrant, which, if you remember the Jerry Hutch thing, there was EAW out for him. That is only issued when the DPP orders a charge. So it's an extradition request. You cannot be extradited for questioning. You can only be extradited for the purpose of charge. So the Gardaí have just been told by the DPP, charge this man. So last week, he was detained by Spanish police in Calahonda, near Mijas, around Malaga. I think it was for having a false ID. It was something quite minor, but they quickly established who he really was. So he was arrested on the foot of this European arrest warrant. Gardaí were alerted. So the process now begins. If you remember, Jerry Hutch was arrested, I think, in the August, and in the September, he was flown home by the Air Corps. It might be a wee bit longer in this case. I think this man has the right to fight it, so it could be 3 or 4 months, but I think he will be coming home.
Okay, so what do we actually know about this man that we can say at this juncture?
He's well known in Ireland. He's very well known in Coolock. I don't think he was regarded as the world's biggest criminal. And my information is he's not suspected of being the trigger man. Right. It's alleged, or the guards would allege, that he had a different role. However, as you, Paul, know, if there's 4 or 5 people acting in concert, common cause, the law people call it, they can all be done for murder. And I think it's on that basis. So, do you remember, what do you call him? Dowdall was charged with murder, and that was reduced to facilitation, and he pleaded guilty to that. I'm not going to say that's going to happen in this case, but you can 4 or 5 people who the guards allege were involved in the plot or the action itself can all be charged with the same offence, which is murder. But that's a long way down the road. But the man is still in Spain. I understand he is fighting it. So it'll be a while before it happens, but I think he will be brought home.
Interesting. One kind of particularly I suppose interesting thing that I remember about this murder and just about that period of time is that feud was so uh, frenzied, and there was the moment that Sean Little was killed, there was a huge effort immediately to get revenge,
Mm.
and close associates of Sean Little wanted revenge, and Sanambar was blamed. And it's I suppose it says a lot that the individuals who, when once they decided he was involved, they took him out at the wake. I mean, that really sent a message right outside Sean Little's family home. Sanambar was murdered. Now, I think subsequent to that, you might correct me if I'm wrong, but I'm just going from memory here and from covering it at the time. There was a realization, perhaps, that maybe Sanambar was not responsible for the murder of Sean Little. But in Gangland, it just goes to show you they don't care. They don't wait for the facts or the evidence. They murdered him, and they asked the questions later.
So look, here's a classic example: Dahi Douglas.
Yeah,
Dottie Douglas. The Kinahan cartel blamed him and another man who was also murdered. He was murdered beforehand, actually, for the November 2015 attempt at a boxing match in West Dublin to murder Daniel Kinahan. And they decided to kill those two men. And they were both murdered. Dottie Douglas was killed in July 2016, and Freddie Thompson is doing life for that. They decided those two people were guilty. They were judge, jury, and executioner. Now, the guards have established neither of them was involved because they were in another pub at the time. But that's Gangland for you. They have a suspicion, you're gone.
And they went on to then blame Caelan Smith, and there was an effort to attempt to murder him in relation to that. So, I mean, they didn't successfully murder Caelan Smith, and obviously Caelan Smith is a serious criminal, and he's serving time in prison. Only recently lost a case, I understand. But yeah, it just goes to show you, doesn't it? They really didn't care at that period in time. They were gunning for revenge. Now, we're not going to say Sanambar was an angel. He certainly wasn't. But I wonder, in hindsight, do they regret that murder? Maybe they don't regret these things in Gangland.
I don't think they're losing much sleep. And we also know nobody's been charged with the murder of Sanambar, but we know that Sean Little's father, Stephen, he is currently doing time. The Drugs and Organised Crime Bureau and probably the Emergency Response Unit foiled a plot to murder Caelan Smith. As you say, Caelan Smith is in prison, but Stephen Little was arrested by the guards. I would say they probably saved Caelan Smith's life. And I think Mr. Little did say, if you'd left me an hour, even I would have got him.
I would have got him. Yeah, pretty brazen. Stephen Little's only just been recently released from prison, so he's already. That goes to show you how much time has passed. Out? Yeah, he's only just been released, which I mean, it seems like only yesterday, but it has actually been a number of years now since that happened. You forget COVID sort of
it's all time. It all becomes a blur, really, doesn't it? Like I was thinking about this, the Regency was 8 years ago, more than 8 years ago. It'll be 9 years ago in February.
Yeah.
Isn't that incredible? Just time flies.
I just started working with yourself the year I started in 2015. So the feud just started. The murder of Gary Hutch was the month I started in the start.
No way.
So I had an unrealistic sort of slap of reality of what it was like to work in tabloid, because the feud just began from the moment I started in the Star. But yeah, it's amazing how time flies. So shall we talk also about Cathal Crotty, because we didn't get an opportunity, and there still is developments in this case. Obviously, look, this is something that it's over 2 weeks old now. I mean, I was covering this story, as were you, when Cathal Crotty received his suspended sentence for a brutal attack on Natasha O'Brien in Limerick in 2022. It's obviously a case that everyone is probably aware of now and has shocked the nation. There's been outrage over that particular suspended sentence, and the DPP is now appealing that particular sentence, not the conviction. But the development that you reported on first and foremost, and by the time this podcast has gone out, Cathal Crotty will no longer be a serving member of the Defence Forces.
Yeah, so the Defence Forces, look, I have to say, every member of the Defence Forces that I've spoken to, and I've spoken to a lot of them about this, from senior to junior, they're all horrified by this. None of them has any pity for him. They're all very angry, and they think he has besmirched the name of the Defence Forces. So there's zero pity for him. So the Defence Forces did want to kick him out, but they, under their regulations, they can't until there's a conviction. Okay, so the conviction was what, two weeks ago, maybe 2.5 weeks ago.
Yeah.
As soon as that happened, they started the process. But it's a process. It's not an overnight thing. So we were trailing and trying to find out when it was going to happen. So today's Wednesday when this has been recorded. And just earlier this week, I got confirmation that at midnight, I was told midnight on Wednesday. So in other words, at 1 minute past 12 on Thursday morning, Cathal Crotty will be a civilian. He will no longer be a member of the Defence Forces. Now, it was supposed to happen last week, but you have to, there were various things you had to do. You have to start the process of handing back all your kit. You have to be paraded in front of your commanding officer, and you had to do a medical. And there were various delays. There were, blood tests and all that sort of thing in the medical that delayed the results, that delayed the process for a few days. But we got confirmation earlier this week. Thursday morning, he's gone. He will no longer be in the Defence Forces. Now, Defence Forces are under pressure about this. I mean, there's zero doubt about it. I know the Taoiseach made comments about it. The Taoiseach made comments. There were lots of comments about it. I think a lot of people in the defence. Well, I'm going to say this first. I was thinking about this. I've travelled with the Defence Forces, and I was thinking, I've never met anybody in the Defence Forces who I would consider to be a prick, right? Just not. But and then I was thinking, the Defence Forces mirror society. And that's they are civilians in uniform, right? And this domestic violence, this wasn't a domestic violence issue, but domestic violence is a horrendous issue in Ireland, and violence against women is a horrendous issue in Ireland. Okay.
Yeah.
So the Defence Forces unfortunately mirror Irish society. I can tell you, you and I know of journalists, of TDs, of teachers, of guards, all involved in violence against women, and the Defence Forces mirror society. And I know that there are 68 members of the Defence Forces who are currently before the courts, not just for violence against women, but for serious offences. Now that's 0.01%, I think, but it's still bad news. What I wanted to ask you, Paul, do you think the Defence Forces should be held to a different standard?
You're asking me my personal opinion. You've caught me off guard, Mick. I suppose, I feel a bit funny about this because I know the Taoiseach, has basically called for anyone who has convictions or anything like that to be, rooted out of the Defence Forces. I found it strange, the sudden political reaction to it. But anyway, that's another conversation. I agree with you. I think it mirrors society, and in society you have bad eggs. So no, I don't think it should be held to any different a standard to any other organization, I suppose. Look, we have an anti-corruption unit in An Garda Síochána, and genuinely corrupt Gardaí have been discovered. Perhaps maybe a similar process within the Defence Forces in order to investigate and root out genuinely corrupt officers, people who have serious convictions to their name or who have done something seriously wrong. Yeah, of course there should be standards for that, but to any different standard to any other organisation, no. Is that a good answer to your question? I don't know.
It's your answer. I sort of think they do, but I think there's a cohort of positions and jobs in Irish society where you have to be held to high standards. Gardaí, firefighters, nurses, prison officers, journalists, politicians. And I'll tell you why I said this, because some of the army lads were saying, what about the public servants? If you're any member of any public service, should you be sacked if you're convicted of an offence? I think it's different. I mean, we know, for example, Crotty's commanding officer who went to court talked about the Defence Forces there to protect people. And there are some jobs that are very sensitive. See, if I was done for drink driving tomorrow, it'd be all over the papers, right?
Well,
that's my point.
I just want to make it clear that absolutely Cathal Crotty should not still be a serving member of the Defence Forces. And I believe because of his conviction, the right move has been made. He should be removed from the Defence Forces. I just want to make that clear. Sorry, it's in case that isn't clear.
No, yeah, no, I get that.
I'm just saying, I find it funny now that the political reaction that politicians have jumped on this and sort of gone on I suppose, a bit of a witch hunt in general. I mean, where were they prior to this case? There's a lot of questions that have in relation to, how suddenly a case like this has spurred on a movement. Okay, it's great that we're having this conversation, but were it not for this being highlighted, and fair play to freelance reporter Dave Raleigh for covering this case in the first place, for giving it the publicity that it deserves, would we be even having this conversation? No.
Yes, and there is a level of soreness that the Defence Forces are getting attacked over this. How can I put this? And they're saying, well, we didn't give him a suspended sentence.
Yeah. Well, I suppose it's not normal to criticize a judge, but it is a highly unusual case in that the judge handed down a suspended sentence in what was a very aggravated assault, where Miss O'Brien was knocked unconscious, and then Cathal Crotty boasted about it on Snapchat, and it's a really horrific case. I think it shocked everyone. I don't think there's a single person in this country that would say a suspended sentence was merited. And I also thought it was odd that the judge kind of leaned on the evidence in relation to his career in the Defence Forces, and essentially said that if he jailed him, that his career in the Defence Forces would be over. As you've said, his career in the Defence Forces was already over. It was already over. So it's very, very hard to square the judge's decision. It's very hard to understand it. To note that judge is now retired.
Yeah.
So it's one of it's this unfortunate end to his career. Look, judges differ. It happens. A different judge might make a different decision. But it is hard. It's hard to understand it, that he balanced it on his career in the Defence Forces, which anyone could see was over no matter what the verdict was going to be.
And also, one thing that the soldiers would be sore about is this whole thing about his commanding officer giving a character reference in court. He didn't. Yeah. He had to go there by law because he had to report on it. And he was asked, he gave a breakdown of his career. And it's not a CV, but it's his report, and it says exemplary, and that's what it says, and that's what he told the court. And then he was asked questions by barristers. You have to answer them.
Yeah, he was just doing his job. I mean, they have to do that no matter what. But I think, unfortunately, the judge treated it like a character reference. Certainly, he leaned on it in his sentencing of Crotty. It's a baffling decision, really, and it's no wonder that the DPP is appealing it. We were talking about this coming on air, what the actual maximum sentence would be for this type of assault.
Yeah, so he was charged with assault causing harm. Okay, and that's under the Non-Fatal Offences Against the Person Act of 1987. So guards will call it a Section 3 assault. Section 2 is assault simpliciter, as my old editor, Ger Collar, would say. So if you push me, or if you touch me, so then there's assault causing harm. Then there's assault causing serious harm, which is very, very rarely employed. But for assault causing harm, the maximum is 5 years in prison. So the judge gave him a 4-year sentence, but it was suspended. And but look, it's up to the Court of Appeal now. It's 3 judges in the Court of Appeal, so they'll decide.
Let's see what happens there. Just in covering this case, I approached Cathal Crotty, did what we call a doorstep in this industry, called to his home address following the convictions. It was about 2 weeks ago now. To see what he had to say for himself. Was he apologetic? You do doorsteps in this job every now and then that kind of stun you. I mean, we think we've seen it all, but I had a very, very interesting conversation with Cathal Crotty and his father. We called to the address, and his father answered the door, Paul Crotty, and was incredibly defensive of his son, and blamed us, the media, for basically. And do you know what? He is right to one extent. Were it not for the media, yes, I don't. And Dave Raleigh in particular, who has covered this case, it wouldn't have come into the public domain. He is right about that, but that's a good thing in my view. But in his view, it was a bad thing. It's like, oh, if it wasn't for the media, this wouldn't be. And you're basically trying to say we've blown it all out of proportion, and that his son has been kind of disproportionately punished as a result. But what was extraordinary was Paul Crotty spoke to me for a very long period of time. Usually at these things, you're kind of expecting to be told to F off. But anyway, it was actually Cathal Crotty who was telling his father to shut up and to stop talking to me. Cathal Crotty was particularly angry at the door. Wouldn't I mean, in fairness to him, he did come to the door and he did initially engage with me, but he said he didn't trust me. He thought I was going to twist his words. I asked him, was he sorry? Eventually, he said sorry, he didn't actually answer that. His father said, of course, he would be sorry. But he did say that he wanted to get back to his career in the Defence Forces. That dream is obviously over now. But he was a particularly angry young fella. Gave him plenty of opportunities now to apologise for the attack. He certainly didn't say anything of that nature to me. But I was stunned by what his father said in particular, and just how much he blamed the media and how little there was, I suppose, remorse and shame for what his son had done. It's not the father's offence, but there was no shame on the part of the father. It was all, it's your fault. It's you and the media. It was extraordinary. I walked away from that door quite stunned by that, really.
Do you think, so it was May 2022, I think the attack happened, wasn't it? I think
Yes.
It was. If Crotty had resigned from the Defence Forces there and then, once he was charged, do you think there would have been as much media coverage?
Possibly not. No. I think that was one of the defining aspects that shocked people, that he still had that career. But the other thing was just maybe the nature of the attack. It was so callous, and he initially tried to blame Natasha O'Brien and say it was her fault, until Gardaí showed him the CCTV footage and he was nailed. He was banged to rights, and he then admitted. So I just want to comment on that briefly, because I'm now seeing, and again, social media is not reflective of reality, but I'm seeing an awful lot of people who are now jumping to Cathal Crotty's defence. It's a bizarre set of circumstances where they're trying to suggest that maybe there's a real story here, that there's some sort of reason why Natasha O'Brien deserved to be beaten, seriously beaten and knocked unconscious. No one deserves that.
And
woman
for him,
or man. And
then for him to say on Snapchat, 2 to put her down, 2 to knock her out.
Yeah,
that's animalistic. And I've seen that stuff on Twitter or X, whatever. It's fucking. People are disgusting. I don't know what it is. They just think that they can, the anonymity gives them a cloak to be pricks.
Yeah.
It's horrific fact. It is sickening.
Crotty accepted his guilt. He accepted the facts that were put before the court. End of. The CCTV footage, which I'm sure if any of these idiots on Twitter saw, says it all. He was shown the footage and he admitted his guilt. He seriously injured this woman. I don't understand how there is ever a justification to attack a woman like that in the street. I don't care what the circumstances were. If you're going to try and say we don't know the full story, there's no justification for it in our society.
And can we just applaud the bravery of Natasha O'Brien? She's been a fantastic advocate for herself and for all other women.
She's incredible, and she's speaking out. I think that's something that some men don't like. So she's been an incredible voice for women since. She's gone out and done numerous interviews, and she has spoken out about domestic violence and violence against women in general in this country. And fair play to her. She doesn't have to do any of that. And as a result of it now, she's getting abuse. I don't know what kind of world we live in sometimes.
My abiding memory of lockdown is the massive rise in domestic violence. Those poor women and those poor kids, but women, mostly women, 95%, whatever.
Yeah.
Of those poor women stuck in houses with their abuser and they couldn't get out because of that killed me just thinking about it. I think it was a 30% rise or something.
Yeah.
Speak to any guard. It's massive. It's a massive problem.
Yeah, I'm thinking of the case of Maeve McLaughlin Doyle, who was spent years being assaulted by her former Garda husband, and he was
Mhm.
also a member of the Defence Forces. I interviewed her in relation to this case, and her heart went out to Natasha O'Brien. She indeed wants to meet her and show her support for her. But I was struck by some of the things she said. Like, she really saw a lot of similarities in the case, just in terms of um, how these men, I suppose, try to hide behind their career and their uniform. I mean, look, we live in a different society now where they didn't get away with it. Ultimately, it wasn't enough of a defense, but they do try to, I'm a member of the Defence Forces or a member of An Garda Síochána, and that in some way gives them a shield from, it gives them some sort of. I'm now going to argue against myself and think, yeah, you're right. Perhaps they do need to be held to a different standard because, yeah, I mean, in both of those cases, both men tried to lean on their career to some degree to kind of, I suppose, make themselves look better. There's no excuse, and especially when you wear that kind of a uniform. Um, yeah, yeah, it's just
Look, I mean, he's there to defend people. His
yeah,
job, the clues in the title, he's in the defence forces. But Paul, I mean, look, again, journalists, if we commit a crime, it's front page news. Look at
yeah,
your man Tom Humphreys. You know what I mean, or
yeah.
various things. So there are certain. I think you do guards. But there's a wide number of jobs that you have to have higher. In my opinion, you have to have higher standards, or it comes at you.
Mm-hmm. We'll leave that there.
Yes.
There'll probably be more developments in that case. We also just want to squeeze in a very interesting development on a story that I remember you working on when it broke in 2022. The discovery, a massive discovery of 8.4 million euro worth of cocaine, which was flown in to Ireland on the 4th of August 2022, and Tim Gilchrist has now just been jailed in relation to that for a staggering 11 years.
11 years is a good whack. It's Section 15A of the Drugs Act. If it's for possession of drugs for sale with intent to supply. So there's simple possession to apply. But if it's over 13,000, it's a 10-year mandatory 10-year sentence. Now, most people plead, and the judges have to shave that off. So you get 5 or 6, 7 years. This fella got 11. It was more than 11 years. A bit of it was suspended, I think, but it's effectively an 11-year sentence. Now, he has been in custody and stuff, so I think he gets out 2029 or 2030. But anyway, it's a very, very significant sentence. Now, so there's a couple of interesting aspects about this. It was Abbeyshrew in County West. Is it Longford or Westmeath? I think it's Longford. Longford. So it's an aerodrome. Okay. And he flew it in from Dieppe on his Cessna. He was a businessman, but he had a Cessna and he used it for leisure. So when the guards became aware of this, I think the French authorities tipped him off. There's lots of liaison between all these police forces that we never get to hear about. I think in this case, it was the French who provided intelligence to the guards. Guards monitored the whole thing. He and a couple of other lads they left the aerodrome, drove a wee while, and the guards, Doc B, intercepted him. So he was brought to Ashburn, and he claimed that he had to do this because people close to him were being threatened. Now, it was interesting, in the court case, the detective sergeant said that story was fanciful, so they didn't believe him. But what's interesting, the Judge Keenan Johnson, spoke about that he was concerned that, about how easy it was to bring drugs in to Abbeyshrew from there. So that's an issue. There are several aerodromes in Ireland that people can use, and there's no round-the-clock checks. Say if you go into Dublin Airport, you have customs, you have guards, whatever. But these aerodromes, now, I've written about this, and we've often written about how there is a concern. At the minute, the Naval Service can put out one ship. Okay, so there is a concern that Ireland's coastline, the seas, are being used to smuggle in drugs, and there'll be lots of significant seizures, and you wonder how many have gotten through. What if it's coming in by air? The court heard that there were 6 previous trips. Okay. And psychologists will say the best indicator of past action is future action is past action. So if he got caught once and he did 6 previous trips, including one, I think, a month beforehand, I think it's likely, and the guards would have a strong suspicion, that he was involved in other shipments coming in. He only pleaded guilty to that. That's only one he's charged over. But just say France to Abbey Shrew or France to any other of these airdromes is another route. I remember about 2006 doing a story about the Kinahans using a light plane to drop drugs. But they didn't land. They actually flew over a golf course and dropped the drugs onto the golf course where it was picked up. So, criminals will do anything to get their drugs in here because that's where the money is. So if that route worked once, it did until the guards intercepted it. What to say it hasn't been used before, or other planes are involved in just dropping drugs into Ireland? It's a big problem.
Yeah, I mean, as much as it's a fantastic development that this man has been jailed for 11 years, it does make you wonder how often are criminal gangs getting stuff in via those methods. And still to this day, you can have no doubt that they are. It's a scary prospect. I mean, we're seeing lots of seizures now at sea. But yeah, I mean, a gang with the resources of, say, the family or the Kinahan cartel, they'll stop at nothing to get drugs in. In terms of these drugs, was it established who they were destined for?
The family were involved. So they're this crime group led by two family members in Clondalkin. They're the biggest operatives in Ireland. The Kinahans are massive, but they're more outside Ireland. So I think the guards would be happy at this stage that it was the family, and they make so much money that they send out for laundering about €8 million a month, not a year, but a month. And there've been a couple of seizures. There was a fella down the country who's got with £4 million. So they have to get the money out to get it out to be laundered. But so work it out, 12/8, that's an awful lot of money that they're bringing out of Ireland. And they're probably obviously keeping some here, but that's how much is going out. The guards have intelligence, or, we're tipped off about that. So that's very, very significant. So they're the biggest gang in Ireland, drugs-wise, on the ground at the minute. Kinahans are massive outside Ireland. But it just goes to show you it's such a lucrative trade.
That's fascinating. And we'll be writing about the family, I'd say, for many more years to come. Yeah. Perhaps one day we'll actually get to name some of the senior leaders like we do the Kinahans. But for the moment, they're below the radar, unfortunately. Too below the radar for us to name them. So we'll leave it there.
Yes.
That was plenty. And I'm only back 3 days. So thanks to everyone for listening. We're still going through the questions. We will put out the Q&A. Unfortunately, as Mick mentioned, his man flu COVID got in the way, but we will have it out. And if you still have questions for us, you can get us on social media. Lots of great questions. So we'll enjoy answering them. And thanks everybody for listening and watching. Thank you.